Hi Ingrid, let's take a look at this last set of essays. I saw also in your email that you had a few questions for us, so let's look at this first and then see what you wrote. Now, this is the one about rainfall in England, Scotland, and Wales. I know there's a lot of information in it. More specifically, there's 36 pieces of information. You should not write about all 36. This is one of those line graphs where you basically have to select information. You have to select the most important pieces of information, and then some of the other pieces of information you have to use other ways, other methods of either explaining them or just not including the ones that are not really important. Okay, so looking at this straight away, this feels too long. Okay, I want to say it's definitely over 250 words. Now, while I often tell students that I'm not concerned if their task 2 is too long, I am concerned if a task 1 is too long. The reason for that is because this really, they're trying to see your ability to select relevant information. So as I always say, it's about as much about what you write as it is what you don't write, okay? Which may not feel like it's an English exam exactly, but it is a skill that they're trying to see if you possess, okay? So I can tell you that this looks too long, but let's read it first, and then we can talk about how you could have done it and what kinds of information you could have left out. So let's get started on that. The above line, it's on a line chart, it's a line graph. So we call them line graphs, bar charts, pie charts. So the above line graph shows the amount of rainfall over a one-year period in England, Scotland, Wales. Overall, England received the highest amount of rainfall throughout the year with the smallest fluctuations. Scotland received both the highest amount of rain in March and October as well as the lowest amount in February. Now, you didn't need to write all of this. Okay, this is already really long, so you could have either left out Scotland or you could have left out some of those details. So what you could have said here is, despite the fact that England on average had the highest rainfall, Scotland was the country that recorded the highest and the lowest rainfall. Okay? But like I said, it would have been an acceptable overview even without that piece of information about Scotland. During the month of January, Wales received the least amount of rain at just under 50 ml, whereas England and Scotland received 120 and 130 ml respectively. In February, the amount of rain in Wales increased, increased by 25 ml, and then with an E, dropped the next few months to the lowest point of 25 in April. There was a, careful, that's an A, not an and, there was a significant increase of 100 ml for May, dropping 50 ml in June, and reaching the highest amount of 125 for July. Okay, fine. In England, the amount of rainfall fluctuated between 120 and 90 ml for the next 4 months. In May and June, the number plummeted to the lowest point of 70 ml for the whole year. In Scotland, the numbers declined with a downward and upward trend and reached the lowest numbers of 75 ml in June. This is really interesting. You start off with a ton of details about Wales, and then considerably less about England, and then one little mini sentence for Scotland. So that was kind of strange to me. I don't know why you did it like that. You gave a lot of details about Wales, and then which each country you spent less time. I do like that you split the year up in half, though. I think that was a good idea. It's one of the ways, of course, you could do it. Let's see what you did in the next paragraph. In England, for the second half of the year, the rainfall, well, you just said the rainfall in England, so this is superfluous. So in England, for the second half of the year, the rainfall fluctuated between 125 and 80. Now, you keep doing this. You keep talking about the high number first and the low and then the low number. I think it should be the other way around. It fluctuated between low and high, and ended the year with the highest amount of rain in all 3 countries at 130 ml. Good. In Scotland, the amount of rain fluctuated between 110 and 75 and dropped with a significant margin of 50 in November. The year ended just above 100 ml, whereas Wales received only 60 ml in December. For the second half of the year, the rainfall in Wales dropped. Now, I don't like that because here you're talking about the end of the year for Wales, and then you're backtracking to go to that second half of the year for Wales. So that's a little, I'm not really crazy about the logic behind that. For the second half of the year, the rainfall in Wales dropped from 130 to below 50 from August to October and had a recovery to 100 in November and dropped again the last month. Okay, now here is where you could have made that comparison to Scotland. That would have made sense. All right, so let's see. Let me see if I can get this, bring it up for a second. Okay, so this is the graph that you were referring to. So let's talk about how you could have done this in another way that would have required just not so many details. All right, so I absolutely agree with you that it's really, really important. There are certain points in these line graphs that cover a year or cover multiple years that I think are super important. So for me, the most important points are the beginning of the year, and then of course obviously the end of the year, and then some of those really important highs and really important lows. So here you have a number of them. Let's start with Scotland. For me, this is important, and then this and this peak is important. Okay? For England, these three peaks here are important, as is this low here. All right? And then you can imagine what I'm going to tell you about Wales. I'm going to tell you that for Wales, obviously the beginning, but then this is really important, and then this peak, and then again that end point. So those are the points that are really important to talk about. Oh, also with Wales, you could mention this plateau because it's really the only plateau we see throughout the entire graph. So I would have structured my answer around those points, okay? And then if you focus just on those, you can write an answer that is that talks about fluctuations, okay, but without so much detail. So let me see if I can give you at least a really brief paragraph maybe about England for that first half of the year. So here's how I would start something about England. England began 2018 with 110 ml of rainfall. It fluctuated over the next 4 months and reached its lowest point in May and June at blah blah, whatever that number is, okay? In the following months, it continued to fluctuate, okay, with 3 peaks in July, September, and December at whatever that number is. What is it, like 130? So that's it. You're done. Okay? Something like that is really all you need to talk about with England. Okay? And then you could do something similar with Scotland. You could say, for example, Scotland had far greater variation than England. Now see, this is where you're making comparisons because they do ask you to make comparisons where relevant, and so that would be a really nice one. So Scotland had greater fluctuations than England. In the first half of the year, it ranged between whatever this number is, 120, dropping to the lowest point in the entire graph, which is February at whatever that is, like 20, okay, only to increase again to its first of 2 peaks in March at 135, okay? Yeah, oh, you know what you could say here? This is also a really nice expression because this is really rather volatile. So you could say that Scotland experienced considerable volatility in the first half of the year, or you could say in the first third of the year, okay? With values ranging from 25 or 30, whatever we said that number was, I think it's around 20, to 130. With multiple highs and lows, okay? Its fluctuation became somewhat less dramatic in the second half of the year. Nonetheless, it did experience its second peak in October at this, and ended the year at this. Okay, so that's really all you have to talk about. And I think you get the point. So this is kind of how I would have done this. Okay, so I hope that gives you some information on how you could have done this task 1 with far fewer words. Let's see now about your task 2. Experts throughout the developing and developed world, not word, have debated whether it is a better option to settle down and start a family earlier on or later on in life. Some believe marrying in your early 20s and starting, ing, a family is the best decision. However, I strongly disagree. This essay will discuss both sides using examples to prove arguments and demonstrate points. Fine. On the one hand, there is ample evidence that shows tying the knot and having children in your 30s has several advantages. Careful with tying the knot. It's a nice idiomatic expression. Of course, I'd love to hear it in a speaking exam, but in your writing, it's a little too informal. Okay? So it has and having children. Tying the knot and having children has. I still want to say has because I'm thinking of them as one thing together. The central reason behind this is twofold. Firstly, couples are financially stronger and have more disposable cash to afford a family. Secondly, older adults are more mature and have better parenting skills. For example, recent empirical research from Oxford University demonstrated that more than 70% of couples that have children later in life find parenting easier than younger couples. Therefore, it is conclusively clear that there is a considerably strong case to be made in favor of marriage and having babies after the age of 30. Okay, so now I'm going to answer your question about supporting your main ideas. Here you had 2 main ideas. You had this one where you said firstly, and then you had the second one where you said secondly. They both need support. Okay? They both do. Now what you did is you kind of had a piece of support here. You had this sentence that was a catch-all that could have, I guess, applied to both of them. But I don't want you to do that. Anytime you make a statement which expresses your main idea, you absolutely have to support it. Okay? So what could you have said here? They are financially stronger and have more disposable cash to afford a family. So you could have said something like, this is because they have spent more years in the workforce, therefore they have had an opportunity to progress along the career ladder and perhaps to also save some money for their family. Okay? And then you could give this example here. So you can see that I really just explained why you say what you say and why you think this. All right? But they both need an example. You don't just put one example which applies to both of them. On the other hand, although there is a strong case to be made for marriage at an older age, the benefits of having children early on in life cannot be ignored. This is largely because younger couples are healthier and have a less complex life. In line with this development, women in their, wrong spelling of their, 20s conceive earlier and pregnancies are not as complex. You don't mean complex, you mean complicated. For example, intensive studies by the UK government found 90% of women giving birth in their 20s have uncomplicated pregnancies and are healthier than, with an N not a T, older pregnant women. Thus, it is possible to state beyond doubt that having children earlier in life can be a positive development. Okay, in conclusion, from the examples above, I fully support the development of waiting till your 30s to get married and starting, ing. Okay, I see. Waiting to your 30s to start a family. Fine. It is predicted that more women will go with this trend in the future. Okay, so since you support it, Ingrid, the order of your paragraphs is wrong. This is the paragraph that you support, not this one. And so since this is what you support, this has to come second. We always talk about the side that we don't support as strongly first, and then close to our conclusion, we put the side that we do support. All right, that's the appropriate order of paragraphs. So that's something you're going to have to look at as well. Okay, so I just looked at your email again, and now at this point what I want to talk about is your other question about the opinion essays, and should you develop both sides if it's asking your opinion. This is a really controversial subject among IELTS tutors, but because I've really spoken to a lot of IELTS examiners about it, I'm going to tell you what they have told me. Basically, the questions in IELTS are phrased in such a way that if you sit and think about any one of them for at least a couple of minutes, you can find some points in favor of the side that you disagree with. It's just the way that it's just the nature of how they are phrased. So essentially they will tell you that find some way to find some validity to the side you disagree with. There should be something that is valid about that argument. Okay? The idea is not for you to present it as, well, some people say, etc., etc. We're not concerned with what some people say. We're concerned with your opinion. So you should express it as if it's your opinion. So with this thing here, I think you did fine. You basically said that there were, you could see both sides of it. However, here is where maybe you come into a problem. You say that you strongly disagree. Well, if you strongly disagree, then it doesn't make sense for you to discuss both sides. So what would make more sense here is if you said, some believe that marrying in your early 20s and starting is the best decision. And while that may be true for childbirth, I don't believe it is true for or yeah, how about this? Not childbirth. So while it is true physically for the mother, for the family as a whole, I don't agree. So this way you're setting up your paragraphs and you're setting up how you're going to develop it. So yeah, it's true. It's easier on the mother to have a baby in her 20s. However, in the long run and in the grand scheme of things, it's better to have children in your 30s. So you have to express that in your introduction. Okay? I hope that answered your question. This was a really, really long correction. I hope it was helpful though. So do we have more essays from you? I think that we might. If we do, I'm looking forward to them. I hope that you can apply some of the things we've been talking about in your next set. If we don't have any more, then I wish you lots of good luck. Keep us posted.